All right, so we're diving deep today into commercial insurance in 2025.
Sounds exciting.
Oh, it is. It is.
I'm ready.
We've got this market outlook report from Barnard Donegan. It's their 2025 outlook, and this thing is massive.
Yeah, they don't spare any details.
It's a beast. It's a beast.
It's a long read.
It covers basically everything. So property, liability, auto, workers' comp, cyber. I mean, if a business needs to insure it, it's probably in this report.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so valuable, right? It gives us this really comprehensive picture of what's going on in the industry.
So what is going on in the industry? I mean, what's the big takeaway here? I'm hearing rumblings that the insurance market might be, easing up a bit after what they've been calling a hard market for like forever.
Yeah, the report, it definitely suggests that things might be shifting a little bit.
Okay.
We might see a bit more competition among insurers, maybe even a slight softening of rates in some areas.
Okay, so not a free for all.
No, definitely not a free-for-all.
No.
And before you get too excited, there are definitely some serious challenges that we need to talk about.
Challenges. Yeah, like those monster hurricanes that just ripped through Florida late last year.
Yeah, exactly. Those hurricanes are a perfect example of what the report calls extreme weather events.
Right.
And those are, a major factor, major driver in property insurance costs.
Yeah, billions and billions of dollars in damage.
Exactly. And those costs, they inevitably ripple through the entire market.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something that, everyone's feeling.
For sure. And it's not just hurricanes.
No, not at all.
We're talking, global turmoil, supply chain, chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it feels like every time you turn around, there's some new crisis brewing.
Exactly. Yeah. And the report highlights a lot of those, geopolitical risks.
Yeah.
Take, for instance, the Russia-Ukraine war.
Right.
I mean, that conflict has just thrown, a wrench into global supply chains.
For sure.
Making it so much more expensive to replace, damaged property or goods.
Oh, yeah. And those increased costs, I mean, they have to go somewhere.
Exactly. They get passed along. And ultimately, it's businesses that end up footing the bill.
Okay, so that's not great.
No.
There's also this thing they call social inflation in here.
Oh, yeah. Social inflation. It's a big one.
I have a feeling this is not good.
No, it's not great news. It's basically, it means that juries are becoming more and more sympathetic to plaintiffs.
Oh.
And they're awarding larger and larger settlements in liability cases.
Oh, boy.
And the report highlights a pretty staggering statistic.
Lay it on me.
The number of what they call nuclear verdicts, those exceeding $10 million,
$10 million.
has skyrocketed in recent years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a trend that, has a lot of insurance companies pretty worried.
That bad.
Yeah, and it's not going away anytime soon.
Okay, well, so what's fueling this?
Well, the report points to a few different factors. One of the big ones is the rise of third-party litigation funding.
Third-party litigation funding, that sounds complicated.
It's basically where you have hedge funds and other investors bankrolling these lawsuits
Okay.
in exchange for a cut of the winnings, if you will.
So it's not even about justice anymore. It's about profit.
Well, it definitely adds, a new dimension to the legal landscape.
Yeah, that's a little unsettling.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
For sure.
And it has, very significant implications for liability insurance, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay, so we've got extreme weather, we've got global unrest, we've got lawsuit mania, and then there's this thing called AI, which, everyone's talking about AI these days.
AI is everywhere, it seems.
It is. So is it a friend or foe when it comes to insurance?
I think it's a bit of both.
Okay.
AI has the potential to really revolutionize risk management, but it also introduces a whole new set of challenges.
Like self-driving cars.
Exactly, yeah. Self-driving cars are a great example.
I mean, they seem to be in the headlines every day.
They are.
And not always for good reasons.
Not always, no. And that's definitely giving auto insurers a few sleepless nights, I imagine.
Yeah.
But it's not just auto. The report also highlights concerns about companies using AI in hiring.
Oh, right. Right.
And facing lawsuits over discrimination.
Okay, so it seems like AI can create as many problems as it solves.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Okay, so we've got extreme weather, global unrest, lawsuit mania, AI throwing a wrench into everything. Sounds like businesses are getting squeezed from all sides.
Yeah, it's a challenging environment out there. There's no doubt about it.
All right, well, let's break this down. Let's look at how these trends are playing out in specific lines of insurance.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's start with commercial property.
Okay.
Is there any relief in sight for these, sky-high premiums?
Well, the report suggests that property insurance rates are starting to stabilize, at least in some regions.
Okay.
However, if your business is located in a catastrophe-prone area,
Right.
you're probably still facing a really tough time finding affordable coverage.
Makes sense. I mean, the insurers are still reeling from these devastating hurricanes.
Exactly.
Those costs have to be recouped somehow.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the report does mention that alternative risk financing options are gaining traction.
Okay.
Things like captive insurance and parametric coverage.
Captive insurance, that sounds like something only mega corporations can afford.
Yeah, it can be quite complex and expensive to set up.
Okay, but what about parametric coverage?
Parametric coverage is it's a really interesting concept.
Okay.
Basically, think of it this way. If you have parametric coverage for hurricanes and a hurricane hits a certain wind speed, you automatically get a payout, regardless of the actual damage to your property.
Interesting.
It's all predefined triggers.
So it's a faster, more streamlined way to get back on your feet after a disaster.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
It could be a game changer for businesses in hurricane-prone areas.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about general liability insurance.
All right, so is social inflation the big bad wolf here too?
I think it's safe to say that social inflation is definitely a major factor here,
Okay.
especially with those nuclear verdicts looming over
Yeah.
everything.
Right.
But there are other emerging risks in the liability landscape that businesses need to be aware of.
Like what?
Well, the report digs into some pretty interesting areas.
Okay.
One of them is this growing liability around biometric data.
Biometric data, so like, fingerprints,
Yeah.
facial scans.
Exactly.
That stuff is everywhere.
It is. And more companies are using it, but they also face, pretty significant liability if that data is lost or misused.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a data breach involving customers' facial scans.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the lawsuits would be brutal.
Right. Swift and brutal, that's right.
Yeah, okay, so biometric data, that's one to watch out for.
Definitely.
What else is kind of lurking out there in the shadows of general liability? I know the report mentioned something about active shooter incidents.
Yeah, it's a terrifying reality for businesses today.
It is, unfortunately.
And the report highlights the fact that businesses are increasingly being held responsible for not doing enough to prevent these tragedies.
So if a company doesn't have, adequate security measures in place or training in place, they could be sued.
That's right. It's a growing area of liability that businesses really need to take seriously.
Okay.
And it's not just about, having the right security measures in place. It's also about having the right insurance coverage
Right.
to protect yourself in case something does happen.
Okay, so active shooter incidents, another one to add to the list.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break here. But when we come back, we'll delve into some of the other lines of insurance covered in this report.
Sounds good.
So stay with us. All right, so we talked about property and general liability.
Uh-huh.
Let's shift gears and talk about commercial auto insurance.
Okay.
A lot of businesses out there, mine included, rely heavily on vehicles.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's the story here? I mean, are we talking across the board increases, or are certain types of vehicles being hit harder than others?
Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but
Oh, no.
the report predicts a continued upward trend in costs for 2025.
Seriously.
Yeah, pretty much across the board.
All right, so what is fueling these never-ending, it seems, price hikes?
Well, like we talked about earlier, those nuclear verdicts, those are still a major factor,
Right.
especially when it comes to, accidents involving commercial vehicles. But it's not just the lawsuits.
Okay.
It's the rising cost of everything.
Oh, of course.
I mean, vehicles are more expensive to repair than ever before. All that new technology, all those sensors and cameras and everything,
Yeah.
it all adds up.
I bet.
And then, of course, you throw in supply chain disruptions and inflation.
Right.
And it's a recipe for higher costs.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so even those, minor fender benders,
Right.
they can end up costing insurers a lot of money.
So it's more expensive to fix cars and there are more accidents happening.
Right.
Well, what about the driver shortage?
Oh, yeah, that's another big factor.
It's all over the news.
It is, and it's forcing companies to hire less experienced drivers.
Okay, so more inexperienced drivers
Mm-hmm.
probably equals more accidents,
You got it.
which means
Higher insurance costs.
it's a vicious cycle.
It really is. Yeah.
It really is.
And then on top of all that, you have the rise of electric fleets.
Oh, electric vehicles. I
Mm.
knew we'd get to this eventually.
It's a hot topic.
Yeah, everyone's talking about electric vehicles, but I honestly hadn't thought about how this might impact commercial insurance.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory in a lot of ways for
How
insurers.
so?
Well, think about it. You have the risk of cyber attacks targeting charging stations.
Oh, interesting.
You have those expensive batteries, there's a risk of those catching fire.
Right, right.
And electric vehicles, they're so quiet, they can actually pose a greater risk to pedestrians.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, so even though, electric vehicles are supposed to be better for the environment,
Right.
they come with a whole new set of risks.
So no escaping insurance headaches no matter which way you turn.
It seems that way, yeah.
All right, well, let's,
But, it's all about managing those risks effectively.
okay.
And speaking of managing risks, let's move on to workers' compensation.
All right, workers' comp.
Mm.
Any light at the end of the tunnel here?
Yeah. Well, we talked earlier about how workers' comp has actually been a bit of a bright spot.
Yeah, you said rates have been decreasing.
Right. It's been relatively stable.
Okay.
But the report does suggest that those good times might be coming to an end.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, I know, right?
What's putting the squeeze on workers' comp now?
Well, it's those usual suspects, medical and wage inflation.
Right, right.
Those rising costs, they eat into insurers' profits.
Yeah.
And ultimately, those costs get passed along to businesses in the form of higher premiums.
Of course, of course.
So, it's something to keep an eye on.
Is there anything else that businesses should be watching out for when it comes to workers' comp?
Yeah, the report also mentions that states are expanding workers' comp coverage
Okay.
to include things like mental health conditions,
Interesting.
which, on the one hand, it's a really positive development.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, mental health is finally getting the attention it deserves.
As
But, it does add another layer of complexity and cost to the system.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else?
The rise of the gig economy,
Oh, right.
that's also, really shaking things up.
I can imagine.
Gig workers, they often fall outside traditional employment models,
Right.
and states are still grappling with how to address that within the workers' comp system.
So more uncertainty, more risk for businesses.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah, so it's definitely something to watch closely.
All right, let's move on to the digital realm now.
Okay.
What does the report have to say about cyber insurance?
Oh, cyber insurance.
That's a big one.
It is. It is. And it seems like the risks are constantly evolving,
Absolutely.
But the good news is the report does acknowledge that no one is letting their guard down,
Okay.
even with the recent easing of rates in 2024.
Easing of rates. Now that is something I was not expecting to hear.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a surprise, but
So does this mean businesses can finally, breathe a sigh of relief when it comes to cyber attacks?
I wouldn't go that far. I mean,
Right.
the report really emphasizes that the threat landscape is constantly evolving.
Right.
It's becoming more sophisticated. Ransomware, for example, it's targeting critical infrastructure now.
Think that change healthcare attack?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that was a major wake-up call.
It was for a lot of businesses, I think.
Yeah, and it showed that even a massive ransom payout,
Right.
it doesn't guarantee a quick or painless recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have AI being weaponized by criminals,
Oh, boy.
making attacks faster and harder to detect.
So it's not just about protecting yourself from hackers anymore.
No.
It's about protecting yourself from AI-powered hackers.
That's right, yeah. It's a whole new ballgame.
It's a little scary, honestly.
It is. It is. And then the report also highlights the rise of supply chain attacks.
Supply chain attack.
Yeah, where hackers, they target your vendors
Oh,
to
wow.
get to you.
So it's like a chain reaction.
It is. It is.
Okay, so cyber insurance rates may be stabilizing,
Hmm.
but the threat itself is becoming more complex.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's move on to D&O insurance.
Okay.
That's the one that protects the bigwigs, right?
That's right, yeah. It's designed to protect directors and officers from lawsuits alleging wrongful acts in their management roles.
Okay.
And believe it or not, premiums have actually been declining.
Declining premiums. Okay, so that's two lines of insurance now with good news on the pricing front.
It is. It is, yeah.
What's driving this?
Well, similar to what we're seeing with cyber insurance, increased competition in the market
Okay.
is playing a role, however, The report does caution that this trend might be short-lived.
I knew there had to be a but in there
No,
somewhere.
I know, there's always a catch.
So what's the catch?
Well, it seems that
AI again?
AI is creating new liabilities in the boardroom. Well, if a company's AI makes a bad decision, the directors and officers could be held personally liable.
Oh, so even if the AI is the one making the decisions, the humans are still ultimately responsible.
Right, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, there's also this whole issue of ESG, environmental, social, and governance.
Right.
And that's leading to more lawsuits against directors and officers for their company's practices in those areas.
Yeah. ESG is a hot topic these days.
It is. It is. And it's definitely having an impact on D&O insurance.
All right, well, what about EPLI, employment practices, liability insurance? Is that one area where we might see some relief?
The report indicates that rates have stabilized somewhat,
Okay.
but there are some pretty significant ifs to consider.
All right, well, lay those ifs on me. What do businesses need to watch out for when it comes to employment practices liability? All right, lay those ifs on me. What do businesses need to watch out for when it comes to employment practices liability?
Well, AI in hiring is a huge one.
AI again.
It seems like it's touching every aspect of business these days.
It really does.
And the EEOC, they're cracking down on companies using AI in ways that could lead to biased hiring decisions.
Right.
So it's similar to what we were talking about with that D&O liability.
Okay.
Even though, the AI might be the one making the initial choices, the company is ultimately responsible.
So you can't just hide behind an algorithm and say,
Yeah.
hey, the computer did it.
Exactly. You need to have human oversight.
Right.
You need to make sure those algorithms aren't perpetuating bias.
Okay, so AI in hiring, that's a big one.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Sort out.
Well, the EEOC has also issued new guidance on a whole bunch of other hot-button issues.
Okay.
Workplace harassment, pay transparency, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act.
Yeah, right.
All of this means employers need to be extra careful,
Yeah,
have really solid policies and procedures in place.
to avoid ending up in court.
Exactly.
It feels like employment law is just a minefield these days.
It's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
It definitely keeps things interesting.
I bet for you.
And the report also highlights that, retaliation claims, they continue to be a major issue.
Okay.
So employers need to have clear policies,
Mm-hmm.
training in place to prevent retaliation against employees who report, discrimination or harassment.
Right. Okay, so it sounds like the commercial insurance landscape in 2025.
Mm,
It's a mix of cautious optimism
yeah,
and looming uncertainty.
I think that's a really good way to put it.
Rates may be stabilizing in some areas, but these risks are evolving.
They are, and they're becoming more complex.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this report, it's definitely given us a lot to think about.
It has.
And I hope it's given our listeners some valuable insights as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this report is packed with information.
Okay.
We've only just scratched the surface here today.
Yeah.
But, before we wrap things up, I'm curious,
Right.
was there anything in this report that surprised you? Anything that really stood out?
Honestly, I was struck by how little the report mentioned blockchain technology.
Blockchain. I was just thinking the same thing.
Really?
Yeah. Everyone's talking about blockchain.
It's a hot topic.
It's going to be this game changer for so many industries. It seems like insurance is ripe for disruption.
I agree. I mean, blockchain has the potential to transform, everything from how policies are issued and managed
Mm-hmm.
to how claims are processed.
Right.
It can increase transparency, efficiency, even security in the industry.
So this report, it's almost like a snapshot of the present.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't fully capture those emerging technologies like blockchain that could really reshape the future of insurance.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point.
All right, well, that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive.
Absolutely.
Helping you stay ahead of the curve. Make informed decisions about your business.
That's what it's all about.
Exactly.
So until next time,
Yeah.
Keep exploring, keep asking those questions.
Absolutely. And remember, knowledge is power,
It is.
especially in a world where the only constant is change.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.